Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Caroline Maria, working as an assistant professor in Loyola College of Education, Chennai. The title of the course is Childhood and Growing Up, which comes under Course 1. We are going to deal with Unit 7, Understanding Adolescence. This video lecture is going to focus on what are the different methods to understand adolescence, like observation, interview, and case study. This video lecture is planned in such a way that the learner will be able to gain thorough knowledge about the adolescents. Let's learn who are adolescents. Adolescents are the individuals who are in the age group between 13 to 19, the teenage 13, 14, 15 up to 19. So the mere word adolescence came from a Latin origin, adolescere, which means to grow up. Adolescence refers to the period of human growth that occurs between the childhood and the adulthood. It is a period of puberty. Young person develops from the child into an adult. So it is a traumatic stage for both the parent as well as even the adolescents, because we'll be discussing about the different problems what they are facing. They are extremely concerned with their appearance. They are trying to establish their own self-identity. What are the special characteristics of adolescence? As I have told you already, that it is a very traumatic stage, very crucial period in their life. But if they are treated well and if they are given proper recognition by the parent, by their siblings, by their peer group and from their teachers and the society, they may develop into very good successful adults. At this particular age time, they do have a lot of perplex physical changes. So they'll be confused with their rapid physical changes. If they are given proper information about the physical changes, they can remain cool and calm. And they'll have heightened self-consciousness. Most of the time they would be thinking that they are watched by other people, but not even a crow would watch. But usually they'll become very self-conscious at that particular period of time. And intensification of urge is prevailing. That is a very special characteristic of adolescents, because they wanted to go for a try, whatever it may be, a puff or a drink, or even they may even try the other activities also. They become adventurous at that particular period of time. Most of the time they'll be craving for independence. When they are in infancy and in the childhood period, they'll be completely depending upon their parent for each and every of their need. But when they come to this adolescent period, they crave for independence. They wanted to be alone. And this particular time, peer group relationship is very highly strengthened in this particular time. They would just give much importance for their peer group and their own advices and all. There is a confusion between idealism and realism at this particular age. Idealistic philosophers says that knowledge comes from the mind. Realistic people says that knowledge comes through experiences. So when they are brought up during their childhood period, they would have thought that they would have given education that knowledge comes from their mind. When they become an adolescent, they wanted to experiment everything and they want complete empirical evidence. So there is a confusion between this idealism and realism for these adolescents. And occasional choice and choosing their own career and with regard to standing on their own leg becomes biggest problem in this particular period. They should be given proper information and proper occasional guidance, and they aspire for leadership. Whatever the work you give, they wanted to lead, and when they are leading, they want perfection, and after completing the task they just go for recognition. So these sort of characteristics are prevailing among the adolescents. Some more characteristics let's discuss on. The development of higher level of intellectual abilities are possible in this age. That's why a lot of subject knowledge is provided to them, and they are asked to go for common competitive examinations also at this particular adolescent period. And they have a characteristic called hero worship. Either they may be inspired by a politician or a cine personality or any other celebrity, and they may have them as a role model. That is what is called as hero worship. Religious feeling will be there because they are the religious feeling is inculcated right from their childhood, and it has to be properly channelized at the period of adolescence. That only will enable them to become a very good person with good character. And gregarious instinct is there. They form groups, boys together, girls together, and discuss a lot, and they keep talking without any time limit. And lack of stability as well as even adjustment. Adjustment is accepting any new environment or any new aspect without any complaint. That is what is called as adjustment. So in this particular age period, they may have this adjustment problem. Excessive sentimentality is common among adolescents. Excitement, they go to the peak. Disappointment, they go to the pit. So both extremes they just go with. And excessive imagination they do have. They would like to live in their own fantasy world. And they each one's interest keeps different. So when they were as children, their interests may be different, but as they grow as adolescent, their interests keep changing. So they are very particular about their own interest, and their mind at this particular period of time will be developing at a rapid speed. So that's why a lot of subject knowledge is given to them. A lot of disturbance with regard to emotional stability they come across with, but they have to be given proper training in order to have emotional balance. Let's focus on the problems of adolescence. At this adolescent period, they come across with a major problem called identity crisis, because they are neither treated as children nor treated as adult. Their parent as well as their elderly people at home or their teachers will never give them a proper recognition as adolescents. That will give a sort of self-confusion among them. This will make them to get themselves alienated from the elderly people. That is called as generation gap. And most of the time they come across with negative and non-conformist attitude. Whenever we say something, immediately they come and raise a question, why not this? Why we should follow only this? So the sort of negative attitude and non-conformist attitude could be possible in this particular age group, and they may hesitate as well as they'll be always confused with regard to selecting a vocation, because first of all they need to identify their special interest. So a proper guidance should be given, proper information should be given at this particular age period of time, by which will enable them to choose their vocation properly. And as I told you already, they do suffer with a problem called emotional swing, which will make them highly restless, because excitement to the peak and disappointment to the pit they go. And most of the time they just ignore the practical world because they wanted to live in the fantasy world. And most of the time they just go for aspiring autonomy. They ask so many questions and they come and protest for each and everything. Peer group dominance is predominant among the adolescents. When a parent is giving some advice to the child, the adolescent may refuse to accept the advice, but the same thing if it is told by the peer group, immediately they just accept in order to please their peer group. So this is these are the problems faced by the adolescents. How are we going to help the adolescents to overcome their problems? First of all, we need to have the proper knowledge about adolescence. So adolescent psychology is essential whoever is dealing with adolescents, and we need to provide them a suitable environment for proper growth. Spend a quality time with them, first of all, to understand them. Then we need to train their emotion and satisfaction of their emotional needs. We need to take special interest of the adolescents, and we need to give them a lot of training and occasional and religious and moral education, and we need to give a lot of guidance services to them, by which we can help them to overcome their problems on their own. What are the methods to study adolescence? We are going to learn three methods: observation, interview, and case study methods. What is observation? The mere word observation came from Latin origin observe, which means to keep open. There are four main types of observation: direct and indirect observation. In direct observation, the observer and the observant. Observer is the one who is observing the person who has to be observed. So the observant is the student. We can consider the observant as a student and observer as the teacher. That when we have a proper understanding between the observer and the observant, that is called as direct observation. Indirect observation is when the observer is not able to go and observe the observant. Rather, the observer may have a substitute to go for the observation. For example, instead of the teacher going and observing the student, the teacher may appoint a class leader to observe the student, observe the problematic student. That is what called as indirect observation. Then the next type is natural and artificial observation. Natural observation is an observation in your regular classroom. As a teacher, when you are teaching, you are observing all the students. That is a natural observation. So it is natural. The observant are unaware that they are being observed by the teacher because they become very natural in the class. When it comes to a sort of like a inspection and all, when the inspection comes, when the higher official comes, the teachers would all already motivate the students to say particular answer and all, so they may behave very artificially. So that is what is called as artificial observation, where the observant is aware that they are being observed. Then scheduled and unscheduled observation. Scheduled observation is pre-planned. As I have told, this any supervision or any inspection, that is pre-planned, scheduled. Unscheduled is spontaneous. Suddenly you may see headmaster or headmistress or principal or chairman may come to class and just simply they may observe the class. So that is called as unscheduled observation. Participatory and non-participatory observation. In participatory observation, observer and observant both will be active. But in non-participatory observation, the observant may be passive and the observer will be very active with regard to the observation. What are the merits and demerits of this observation? Merits are, it is very easy, it's very cost effective, it does not demand much money, very user friendly, it will enhance the awareness about the student and enhance the awareness about the observant to the observer. There are some demerits because it is being done by the human beings as an individual. We may have our own bias and prejudice. Whoever we are observing, if we are giving a negative report, that is called as subjective. So it involves the bias and prejudice of the observer, and so it is very difficult to record the data because they may cook the story with regard to their own preferences. So that will reduce the reliability, and there are very limited people who are very trained in this observation. So lack of trained observers is another demerit we come across with. Now let's see how are we going to understand an adolescent using this particular methodology called observation. Actually, I have formulated some 7 steps, just we go one after the other. We can just have an example that in your class you are having an adolescent who is having a habit of stealing others things, may give a sort of pleasure to him. So we can have it as an example that a stealing habit is being observed. So we need to go for the first step, that is observation of the behavior. First of all, we need to directly perceive the observation of the behavior of the problematic adolescent. We need to identify who is having this particular problem. Then we need to start our procedure. So after identifying the person, we can very carefully start observing the student. And whenever the child is undergoing that particular stealing habit, we need to observe very carefully and make a note of all the information, because when we delay in the information noting, that will not have any sort of reliability. So we should not delay in recording, rather immediately soon after observation we are expected to record. So that will make the observation very objective. After writing down all the information, we need to go for a sort of analysis. So, what makes the student to go for this particular stealing habit? So, after the behavior is observed and completed, it has to be analyzed objectively and scientifically in order to go for a proper interpretation of the behavior pattern of the student. So, we need to find out the reasons for stealing by the child. Then after we need to go for generalization. So after analyzing, we need to go for, okay, these are the reasons based upon the analysis and interpretation of the data collected with the help of the observation method. It is possible to make the generalization saying that because of poverty or because of so and so reason, the child is stealing. Here we are not giving a justification. I'm making it very clear. We are coming to a general conclusion. This is the reason behind the stealing habit of the student. Then after, we need to develop a rapport between the teacher and the student, that is between the observer and the observant. Then we need to guide the student, guide the child, guide the adolescent in order to make them understand the consequences of stealing. For example, we can just help them to see from whom the person has stolen something, how he or she is affected, how she or he is crying for whatever the lost thing, and all this situational analysis and all this real-time experiences we need to provide to the person. That will help them to overcome the problem. Then after, we need to check whether the adolescent has really come out of the problem, withdrawal of the problem even after a month. So after a month, after you check whether the student has really come out of the problem, there ends your observation. So this is the procedure we need to follow. Next method is interview method. Interview is conversation with a purpose. According to Scott and others, an interview is a purposeful exchange of ideas, the answering of questions, and communication between two or many persons. According to Bingham, he defined interview as conversation with the purpose. When you are conversing with another person, simply that is called as chatting. That is called a simple conversation. When you converse with the purpose, that is what called as interview. So the main objective of interview is to collect first-hand information from the concerned person itself. So when you wanted to find out information from a person, straight away you can schedule an interview and can just go and collect the information, rather collecting information from second person, third person and all. So it will help the person to establish the mutual understanding between the interviewer and the interviewee. Two people are involved in this process, interviewer and interviewee. Interviewer is the teacher, interviewee is the student. What are the different types of interview? Preliminary interview. So here the candidate is given freedom by giving job details. These are the general types of interview. So in preliminary interview, the candidate is given freedom by giving job details during the interview to decide whether the job will suit him or not. Then patterned interview is a sort of interview which is decided well in advance. Depth interview is an interview which tries to portray the interviewee in depth detail. Then stress interview is an interview where the interviewer is giving some sort of situational analysis to the interviewee to check their emotional stability. Now, what are the guidelines for effective interview? An interview should have a definite time and schedule known to both interviewer as well as to the interviewee. Interviewers should ensure a limit of time limit as well as privacy, element of privacy for the interviewee. We should not ask some questions which will embarrass them. An interviewer should show the sense of sensitivity towards the interviewee with regard to the sentiment, as well as we need to be very sympathetic towards the interviewee, because we should not put them into a very embarrassing situation. So structured questions should be previously planned and organized, and that only will have a more reliable interview than the unstructured interview. Interpersonal skills and motivation are probably the best evaluated one at the time of interview. How well you gel along with the interviewee, like how well like you get along with the person and try to get the proper answer, that is very essential in order to make your document. What are the limitations of interview? It is held in an artificial situation. You cannot just go and ask question in a normal environment. You have to go for a proper setup. And bias of the interviewer plays a major role. If the interviewee is not comfortable answering some question, the interviewer should not keep probing the interviewee, and it needs a well trained competent interviewer who is very good at communication skill. And it is with regard to time and money, it is very costly and it is a laborious job with regard to time and money. Now, how are we going to understand the adolescent using an interview method? We can take any example. For an example, a state rank holder, the one who has passed in this NEET examination, who has come out with very flying colors, or the one who has come from a very low socio-economic status without much educational facility but secured very good mark. So we can pick out some people like this and we can go for an interview. First of all, we need to identify the person or even the problem. Same way you can take the person who got failure mark in their 10th standard or plus 2. So from them also we can just go for an interview. So either identify the problem or the success of an adolescent. Then we need to go for a structured interview by formulating proper questions. After formulation of the questions, we need to go and ask those questions to the person concerned and record the data. After recording the data, we need to go for an analysis and form general ideas. So that general ideas will be essential and helpful for the other people. For example, if you are interviewing a person who has secured state first rank, they may say, these are the educational tips I have undergone, these are the study habits I have undergone, all these are the essential data. So these data we can provide to the other people. And same way, if we come across with any negative ideas from the interviewee, we can inform the problematic adolescent and we can help them to overcome the problem. From the successful people, very good motivational inputs we can pass on to the other people. From the ones, those who have failed already, we need to help them to overcome their problem. What is case study or case history? Collection of data from an individual or from an institution is what called as case study. Studying about the case or studying about the individual, and it focuses on the life history or attitude or behavior of a person. So here we can take any adolescent who has come across with any problem or any success. Same way, either gifted children or low achiever, anyone we can take and we can go for an analysis of the study. So we need to collect the data. So the purpose of case study is to study the individual in depth in order to understand them, because we need to go for a data analysis and we need to give generalized information to the other people. Same way, if the person is a problematic person, we could help the person to overcome the problem. There are some demerits of this case study. It is once again subjective, because the one whoever is doing this case study, he can add his own bias and prejudice in order to prepare the report. So it is not 100% reliable, and of course it is time consuming, because within a day or two you won't be able to collect all the data. Let me give you an example of what are the data to be collected when you are going for a case study. First, you need to go and collect the data of name of the student, age, sex, religion, birth order, whether they are first born, middle born or last born, number of siblings, which standard, which school, what type of school, whether government school, government aided or private school, location of the school, rural or urban, medium of instruction, Tamil, English or any other vernacular language, type of family, joint family or a nuclear family, name of the father, father's educational qualification, whether the father is an illiterate, school level or college level studies, father's occupation, daily labor, self-employed, government employed or private employed, annual income. Same way with regard to mother, name of the mother, qualification, mother's occupation, annual income, dominant language spoken at home, ambition of the student. Then we need to ask about the hobbies, academic performance, whether below 50 percentage or 50 to 80 or 80 to 100. You can have your own ratio. And you can ask some personal questions like whether the student adolescent is able to answer for all these questions in three category as yes, no, sometimes. I have pleasant learning experience or environment at home. I have supportive parent. I am attentive in class. I understand when the teacher teaches in the class. I understand when I read the lessons at home. I learn better when I listen to someone. I prefer to learn by doing. Like these type of several questions you can pose to the child, adolescent in order to collect the data. So after collecting the data, we need to go for proper analysis. So how are we going to understand the adolescent using this case study method? First of all, we need to identify the problem. Then we need to understand the student. First of all, we need to develop a rapport. So as I told, the child will not answer all these questions within a day or two. You need to develop a confidentiality among the student. Student may think that you are a confidential person and he or she may feel comfortable coming and talking to you. Then after developing the rapport, we need to find out the reasons for the problem. Then we need to collect the data, analysis, and go for an analysis of data. Then suggest the measures to the adolescent to overcome the problem. Then help the student to overcome the problem. Then after we need to go for a follow-up work. Check whether the behavior is modified or not. If the behavior is modified, that is the victory of this case study method. What are the key takeaways from this video lecture? Adolescence is the period of stress and storm. Parents, teachers should help the adolescents to overcome all their problems and become responsible citizens. Let me ask you some questions for you to reflect on. As a teacher, how will you promote emotional balance in your adolescent students? Suggest any two measures to help the adolescents to overcome their negative peer influence. These are some of the books for your further reading. Thank you for listening, students. Wish you all good luck.